Welcome to 3D Journeys, Introduction to Nepal. The title of the presentation is Goddesses and Saints in Nepal. I am Dr. David Ahearn. I'm the chair of our religion program here at LaGrange College. And you may be wondering, why on earth Nepal? It really is literally the other side of the earth. And as I was flying over there for that trip, and it took about 30 hours and 6 changes of planes to get there, it came into that saying about how you can't get there from here. And it really does seem like the uttermost parts of the earth. And you might be asking why. The reason that I chose to go there during my sabbatical about 8 years ago is because I teach about Asian religions, but I had never had the opportunity to completely immerse myself into a traditional religious culture. My wife is Japanese, and I'm often in Japan, and when you're there you can see how clearly Zen Buddhism has influenced Japan, but Japan has become largely a secular culture. And I wanted to go to a place in which Buddhism and Hinduism are both vibrant and living religions. And I chose Nepal for a couple of reasons. One is that these are practiced in a unique form, in a very traditional form, and a form that has really not changed for the last 1,000 years. The second reason is it's the only culture I know of in which Buddhism and Hinduism coexist together in the same place, and we can see some interactions there that are between them. Another reason was just purely selfish. I have had on my bucket list ever since I was a college student a desire to do a high altitude trek in the Himalayas, so it was an opportunity to do that. The fourth reason is that Nepal now is full of a lot of Tibetans. As Tibetans have suffered under Chinese oppression, they, in an effort to preserve their culture and their religion, a lot of them have migrated down to Nepal. So I have been wanting to learn and get immersed in Tibetan religion for a very long time, but it's very hard to do that in Tibet itself because they feel so much outward pressure from the Chinese. So they're much more relaxed in Nepal, and it's much easier to get a full immersion experience. Nepal is a multi-ethnic, multi-linguistic culture. If you look here on the map, you will see that Nepal fits into this little slot between India on one side and Tibet on the other. And there are these elevation bands going through the country. And so if you're down in the lower elevations near India, it looks very much like an Indian culture. And then as you move up into, if you can see there, Kathmandu is in a valley, and the towns around there, Bhaktapur and Patan, are all the flowering of a distinctly Nepali culture. And this was the center of a Nepali empire in what would be our Middle Ages. And I'll be showing you some slides about that right now. But this whole Kathmandu Valley is part of the UNESCO World Heritage Sites. So you're able to see that there. And then if you move into the higher elevations, the people begin to look increasingly Chinese or Tibetan, and they become increasingly Buddhist as you get to that border. So it's a very interesting place to be. So why do people go to Nepal? Well, in the fall and the spring, Nepal is full of climbers everywhere. And I did my own trek there. I trained for 6 months to get ready for it, and then when I got there found that I was not even remotely ready for the altitude and for the elevation changes. First day on this trek, 3,000 feet up. I did not think I was going to survive it. But as you can see, a spectacularly beautiful place. This is in the Annapurna region where I did some climbing. And then you can see Pokhara, one of these beautiful mountain villages. This is the World Peace Stupa in Pokhara, a spectacularly beautiful place. The other intriguing thing about Nepal itself is that you just feel like you're going back in time. It's like going back 1,000 years. People still wear traditional clothing. The religions are practiced in their original forms. This is a gentleman I found up in the mountains, and he is plowing with a wooden plow, like people have been using for 8,000 years. That technology just has simply not changed. Well, I want to begin first by talking at least a little bit about some distinctive features of Nepali Hinduism. Like all Hindus, there are the 3 main gods there, Brahman, Vishnu, and Shiva. Brahman is the creator god the one who is the origin of all things. But Brahma is not largely actively worshipped now. Rather, Brahma is seen as this living godlike essence that exists in each and every one of us. Each one of us has Brahma inside us. Literally, each one of us is a deity, if we're just can become aware of that. The gods that are actively worshipped are Vishnu, this creator and preserver, and then all of the gods and goddesses associated with the Vishnu tradition. And then Shiva, who leads the world through these dynamic processes of cycles of creation and destruction. So of course you'll see a lot of worship of this Trimurti, these three main gods there. For example, this is Patan. This is a Vishnu temple there in Patan. You can see that the Nepali people are very skilled in stonework and wood carving, and this is from about the year 1400. Here is a close-up of that temple. You can see the elaborate wood carving, and these are all demigods within the Vishnu tradition. As you wander around in Nepal, you'll just see that religion is just part of everyday life. Here was just out there on the street a little shrine, and this is to Ganesh, the elephant-headed god, and you can see it's covered with this turmeric paste that people just come by as they're waiting for a bus or they're on the way to work, and they'll stop and they'll pray a little bit and they'll rub some of that on the god. This was just across the street from my hotel. Down the street a little further is a Shiva lingam. So you see Vishnu and Shiva are worshipped both actively in this place. Buddhism is also there, and these religions are all just mixed a little further down. Here is, for example, the Itum Bahal Buddhist shrine, and this is ancient. And what I love about this is you can see this Bodhi tree, this 1,000-year-old tree which took root in the shrine and now is completely overgrown it, and its roots are just surrounding. The Bodhi tree is the place where Buddha got his wisdom experience, right? And so I just love that sense of how this Buddha wisdom has just permeated down through that shrine. Now, what is really distinct, though, about Nepali Hinduism is its focus on a particular goddess. Now, all Hindus do believe in a divine goddess. Most of them will worship Devi, who is the mother goddess, and that is the mother goddess at the core of all of the female deities. What is distinctive about Nepal is that they worship Kali in particular, who is known as the slayer of demons. And Kali is worshipped especially in the Himalayan region and then also down in Calcutta. Calcutta is named after Kali. Kali is known as the Dark One. What I love about introducing students to world religions is we have to really try hard to get our minds around images that are utterly unlike our own, and to try to climb into the souls of other people and imagine what it is that they see. What do you possibly see in that image that could be the devotion center of your life? There she is, standing on top of a being. She has a sword in her hand, she has a severed head, she has a necklace of skulls around her neck, and you ask yourself, what on earth could you possibly see about Kali? Kali would be fearsome if she's coming after you. But Hindus believe that she is God working on our behalf to protect us and save us from evil. Now, there is an ancient Hindu story about a war that went on in heaven long before human beings came on the scene. And there was the leader of these evil gods. His name was Raktabija. And he began to go at war with all of these, we might say, demonic forces against the other gods, and they were unable to kill him. The reason they could not kill him is because every time they struck one of these demons with their weapons and the blood hit the earth, it would sprout into more demons. And so they were about to be overrun. And right then, Kali came in to rescue everyone. You'll see with Kali that she has this long, rolling tongue. Well, according to the legend, she went in and attacked Raktabija, and every time she struck him and the blood was about to hit the earth, she put her tongue down and caught the drops of blood in her tongue. Now, as she began to slay him and she began to drink more of this evil tainted blood, she herself began to be overcome with these evil forces. And after she killed Raktabija, she went on a rampage and began running through heaven, killing gods and tearing down mountains and emptying oceans. And finally, this being underneath her is Shiva. That Shiva laid down in front of her and gave his own life, and he says, if you're going to kill anyone, you'll have to kill me. And as she stood over him, she finally came to her senses and was able to shake off this evil. Now, what sense do we make of this? Now, this is a Kali image here, just in the neighborhood in Kathmandu at one of the temples. What do we make of this image? I think actually Christians might be able to understand this in some ways. This is about someone who came into this world of evil and destruction, took evil into themselves, and was able to do, through an internal struggle, to be victorious over, Christians would say, the powers of sin and death, and then work on our behalf to save us, right? So Hindus that are in this tradition really see their world as being one that is constantly under attack by evil forces. And only Kali can come and save them. Now, what is unique about Nepal is that it preserved a very ancient practice of worship of Kali that involves animal sacrifice. Now, most Hindus throughout the world now are vegetarian, and they don't kill animals unnecessarily. But there was a very long practice of animal sacrifice in early Hinduism that gradually disappeared. But we still find it there in Nepal. Now, on the day that I was there, and I timed this to be there on her holiday, Dasain, the Dasain holiday, people tell me that there are about 15,000 goats that are sacrificed on that one day in the temples. I chose not to bring you video of this, but I will tell you that the entire town just smelled of blood on that day with these animal sacrifices that were going on. And again, the sense about blood being holy and Kali taking this blood in, and it's a way of participating in Kali's sacrifice. I did want to show you, as I was up in a high elevation, this is about 10,000 feet, I began to see these goats on the move. And I had a Sherpa guide with me, and I asked him, what on earth are all of these goats doing moving down the mountain? And then he mentioned to me, well, they are all going down the mountain to be sacrificed. That every family in Nepal is supposed to bring a goat to the temple, every Hindu family. And it is usually the responsibility of the eldest daughter to procure the goat and then to bring it home. Now, that's not such a big deal if home is next door. But you will see out in public transportation goats moving around on the bus, on the train, on people's backs, of everybody bringing these goats home. Now, I will tell you, by the time they get home, they're usually not in very good shape. And then they are brought to the temple. This is the holiday of Dasain, which goes on for about 2 weeks, and on the 9th day is the sacrifice. It is quite graphic, and I've saved you from some of that, but those large Nepali curved swords that you may have seen on television, the goat is brought in, the priest cut off the head, the blood is spurt on the altar, and then there's a barbecue that the priests share, and then the family takes the rest of the goat home and has a feast. Okay, so all of this is done for Kali. Now, it's really hard, I think, for an outsider to make sense of this, right? It just seems so strange and off-putting. So I wanted to give you a poem. This is written by Ramprasad Sen, and this is a poem that he wrote to Kali. And I think we can get into the sense about what Kali means to a worshiper here. He says, I'm sweating like the slave of an evil spirit, flat broke, a coolie working for nothing, a ditch digger, and my body eats the profits. 5 elements, 6 passions, 10 senses, count them all scream for attention. They won't listen, I'm done for. I'm a slave to my own passions and a slave to my own karma. And then this wonderful image, a blind man clutches the cane he's lost like a fanatic. So I clutch you, mother. But with my bungled karma, I can't hold on. right? He's unable to save himself, and he has to seek after the mother to save him. Prasad cries out, "Mother, cut this black snarl of acts, cut through it, and let life, when death closes down, shoot rejoicing out of my head like a rocket." What a wonderful image that is of the way that the Himalayan people value and trust Kali as the one who's going to save them. Now, that is one unique goddess in Nepal. I'd like to talk to you about a second. This is in the town of Patan. You can just see this beautiful ancient wood carving here, again from about the 14th century. And this is the palace where one of the Kumari lives. I don't know if any of you heard about the Kumari, but these are actual living goddesses. So each of the main clans within Nepal will go through a divinization process that involves astrology, it involves casting of lots, and they will settle on a young girl, usually about age 4 or 5, who literally becomes a living goddess. She's brought into the temple area. She is constantly attended by attendants who put on makeup and flowers and dress her. Her feet can never touch the ground. And she cannot have conversation with anyone outside her immediate family. But what is she there to be? She is there to be a representative of the goddess on earth. Now, I said to you at the beginning that Hindus believe that the Brahman, the divine force, is within everyone, and each one of us is divine. And so there's a very thin veil in Hinduism between the divine and the human. People can, like a guru, can cross over from the human into the divine fairly easily. And in this case, the divine has rested in the spirit of one of these girls, and one of their big features is that they bring in people who are there to get blessing. They also have a place during festivals that they are brought out, they're put on display, they're a sign of the goddess at work among the people. I was very fortunate. My guide pulled some strings, said he had a Western professor, and I actually did. The picture here you see in the left-hand side of this particular Kumari, I actually had an audience with her. I was able to come in and receive her blessing. However, I will tell you, it was at the end of the day, and she was not smiling and did not seem very pleased that I was there. So I didn't feel entirely blessed by that. Well, you might ask yourself, what happens to these girls? Well, when they reach puberty, they are no longer goddesses. Now, I have a daughter myself, and I will say, at 3 or 4, she was an angel. When she reached puberty, she was no longer a goddess. So I think we can understand this. But then these girls have to go back. They go back to their families, and they find it very, very difficult to go on. Imagine that you've lived 10 years as a goddess. How do you go back, right, to carry out the trash and milk the goats? It's very, very difficult. And it's also seen as rather suspicious for people to go marry one of the Kumari. And so they live actually very lonely existences after they've stepped down from this role. It's very, very difficult. So these two goddesses, these are something unique about the Hinduism of Nepal. Finally then, I'd like to shift gears and talk about the second major religion in Nepal, and that is Buddhism. I spent a lot of time tracking down Buddhists in Nepal. Limbini is the historic birthplace of the Buddha, and I was able to visit there. This is one of the holiest places, the city of Buddha, and this is the stupa, or the holy temple that is right there. You can see it's a magnificently beautiful place. Now, this belongs to traditional Nepali Buddhism, but what has happened that as the Chinese oppression grew, more and more Tibetans came and they began to settle in this area because this is a holy place, number one. Number two, this was part of the old historic trading route between Tibet and Nepal. And so they just began to settle there, and then they began to build monasteries there and preserve their own culture. So there are just Tibetans everywhere up around this area. I spent about a week at this monastery, living there with the monks, going through the prayer services, going through the chanting, and I just wanted to fill myself in it completely. And it is an otherworldly experience. Tibetan Buddhism, it is not like anything else you can imagine. This is a recording that I made of morning prayers going on there. Now I have to say, most of these are student monks. They're boys who are not going to be monks. They're just there to sort of like going to church school. And so they're not entirely disciplined or serious. So you'll see a lot of bobbing and weaving and tired backsides from sitting there for a long time and a bit unruly. But you can see this marvelous, rich architecture. What you can't see, because I don't have a sound recording of that, is what's called polyphonic chanting. All of us have a tone and an undertone in our voice, and a really good singer has a very deep second tone that gives a richness to the voice. What the monks have learned to do is to amplify that undertone. And so you will hear this very deep, guttural chanting going on of a chant, and then about 2 octaves below that and a fifth, this deep, deep voice that comes out from the diaphragm of a harmony, everybody chanting in harmony. Truly another worldly experience. So I lived with the monks there. I was really getting immersed in the service, and I would like to share with you about a particular personal encounter as a way of ending this story. It's my encounter with the abbot of the monastery. All around the monastery are these prayer flags, and the idea is that as the wind whips through these flags, each one of them is bringing out a chant of a Buddhist prayer out into the world. It's a really wonderful image. But they eventually become soiled, and then they have to be taken down and burned. And I was out there on the edge of this cliff, looking at eagles flying way below me out in the Kathmandu Valley, and I saw this man beginning to burn these prayer flags. And he is wearing the traditional color of a monk, but there was nothing about him that was terribly remarkable. But we began to chat. He spoke a little English. I knew not much Nepali, but cell phone with Google Translate helps these days. And began to talk with him, and he realized that I was a professor of religion from America. And so as he burned the flags, he invited me to come home with him. And so we went to his home, and it was just a little stone dwelling out there on the edge of the cliff. This was his sister and his niece who were there. And they offered me a cup of chai tea, and I sat out in the courtyard, and it was just a beautiful, beautiful fall night high up in the Himalayas. It is impossible to describe how beautiful this night was. And the niece was making what is essentially Nepali funnel cakes, squirting this dough into this hot oil, and then offered me that. The little pup was out there playing around, and his sister had come in right before then with her back laden down with aromatic herbs that she had gathered from the mountainside, and spread those out to dry, and those were going to be ground up to make incense. So there was this beautiful sunset, there was the dog, there was the funnel cakes, there was the chai, and there was this wonderful smell of incense. It was a truly magical night. But then the abbot invited me to do something that few Westerners get to experience. The reason that this place is so holy is that it is the scene of one of the great defining stories of Buddhism. And again, this is an odd story for a Westerner, but I think it can help us get into the inside. The story is, and this is a picture I took of a cave there, the story is that Buddha went through many, many lifetimes, infinite lifetimes of building up karma and rebirth in order to become the Buddha. At the last birth before becoming the Buddha, this man did something so virtuous that it brought so much karma into his life that he was catapulted up into the state of being a Buddha. The story is that there is a monk who was meditating in a cave. And he began to notice that in the cave there was a tiger with him. But the tiger didn't attack him. And he began to notice then that this was a mother tigress. She had 2 cubs, and she was starving to death. And she was so weak that she could not move. And as the monk began to meditate, he had so much compassion on the tiger that he vowed to keep her alive. What you might not be able to see in the detail here is that he picked up a knife and he cut off a chunk of his own thigh and fed it to the tigress. And she was nourished by that meal and strengthened, and then she was able to gather her strength and she attacked him and killed him and ate him. Now, this act of self-sacrifice and compassion for all beings was so great and so strong that this monk was then reborn to become the Buddha. This was the last act of goodness that the Buddha did before being reincarnated as the Buddha. Now, this is a bas relief carving that's done there in the cave where this happened, and then next to that is the little shrine. He invited me in there to come with him in the shrine. And then he asked me if I would like to light a candle. And I'd like to then end our conversation with a bit of reflection. I am a United Methodist minister. I am a Christian, and although I have learned from many, many religions that I've incorporated in my own spiritual walk, I also call myself a Christian. And I ask myself, what would it mean for a Methodist minister to light a candle to the Buddha in this cave? And I thought about that on many levels. One of them was my host had offered me such kindness that night and brought to me something that was so holy to him. And how could I not honor that hospitality? That was one level. And then another level, I began to reflect on myself. You know, Jesus, when he was alive, hung around a lot of people, and not all of them were Jews. What would Jesus have done if he was offered to go into that temple and light a candle? I began to think that I think Jesus would have lit a candle, honoring compassion, honoring sacrifice, honoring mercy, wherever it is found. What I find so fascinating about the Buddhist tradition is that Christians and Buddhists knew nothing about each other until the 19th century. There were a few contacts earlier than that, but not any really creative encounter with each other until the 19th century. These traditions grew up and they matured and they developed their own inner sense of what they're all about entirely apart from each other. And what I find so fascinating is that both religions wound up in exactly the same place. What is the spiritual life about? What is it all about? It's about compassion for suffering and a willingness to sacrifice ourselves for those who suffer. And so I lit the candle, and I felt good about it. And I walked with the monk back to his home and looked out over this view of the sun going down over the Himalayas and felt at peace. Thank you for being with me, and I look forward to your responses.